What about second breakfast?
Time for second breakfast.
Welcome to Second Breakfast. I am Monster from Breakdowns for Breakfast here to give you some more music news, music facts, stories, weird music rabbit holes. Monster's brain went down. So, starting off this series, I've been going back to our old Breakdowns for Breakfast episodes and trying to find interesting things from previous episodes, whether it's stuff we forgot to mention or just neat stories I found along the way. And this is an interesting one. So on episode 3, we discussed Caroline Spine's album, Attention Please. I loved it. Danger didn't like it nearly as much as me. He says it's a nostalgia thing. I just think his musical tastes are not as good as mine, but that's neither here nor there. He's not here to defend himself. So yeah, I'll stand by that. His musical taste is not as good as mine. Boom. Anyway, when I was discussing that album, the main thing I said I liked about it was the way it sounded. I really liked the production, specifically in the rhythm section. Now, on that episode, I mentioned that Jimmy Newquist was the lead vocalist and guitar player and main songwriter. He essentially is Caroline Spine. But I bragged so much about the rhythm section, and I never once mentioned the other members of the band. So, I believe during Attention Please, the band had Jimmy Newquist on guitar and vocals, Mark Hoff, guitar backing vocals, Jason Gallardi on drums and percussion, and Scott Jones on bass. And again, I think Jason and Scott are kind of the unsung heroes of that album. The drum and bass is so good. So a couple other things I was looking at. It would appear that Jimmy Newquist kind of had his own thing going. They got signed by Hollywood Records. They released Monsoon, which had the song Sullivan, which was a minor alternative rock hit. And then Attention Please, which actually did have a little bit of traction as well. Turns out Attention Please made it to Billboard's mainstream rock charts up to number 30. And then the song Nothing to Prove got to number 23. So that's pretty cool. But there was a little bit of turmoil between the band and the label, so they ended up parting ways, and that's when Caroline Spine sort of has been independent ever since. And there's a couple more albums on Spotify and streaming you can listen to, but they've actually released some newer stuff, I think maybe even as early or as late as like 2020, 2021, but it's you have to get it through the band's website. So anyway, talking about the production of this album. So I was like, okay, I really like the way this album sounds. So who worked on this album? And boy, did this put me down a rabbit hole that I had to share with anybody who would listen. Okay, so it was recorded, and I'm going to get a lot of these names wrong, and I apologize, but just wait. There's a bonus at the end of all this. So it was recorded by a guy named Karam Costanzo, and he worked on a lot of later day Guns N' Roses, Chinese Democracy stuff, which, hey, those songs aren't great, but it sounds good. You know, it's a good sounding record. But he also worked on Purple and Tiny Music by Stone Temple Pilots and Evil Empire by Rage Against the Machine. So those are some stacked records. It was produced by a guy named Roy Thomas Baker. Now, this guy has a super long list of credentials. A few of the people he worked with were the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, The Who, Jet, Motley Crue, Frank Zappa, and the Mothers of Invention. So another cool dude. But it gets even cooler. So after this Roy Thomas Baker started to get popular, he co-founded this company called Neptune, which was Trident's record company. Shortly thereafter, he met the band Queen, and he became like their go-to guy, and he worked on their first 5 albums: Queen, Queen 2, Sheer Heart Attack, A Night at the Opera, and Jazz. Night at the Opera is one of my favorite Queen albums. It's sort of like we've talked about on other episodes. It's not a concept record, but it's kind of a vibe record. And of course it has Bohemian Rhapsody, which this Baker actually won a Grammy for. So yeah, so he's won Grammys. He was actually in the Guinness Book of World Record for the best hit song, which was Bohemian Rhapsody. All right, so moving down this line, it was mastered by a guy named Dave Collins. Same thing, incredible long list of credentials. He mastered several greatest hits collections. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but when a band puts out a greatest hits collection, they typically remix and or remaster a lot of the songs. And so Dave Collins did that for a lot of bands, including The Police, Blink-182, and one of my favorites, A-Sides by Soundgarden. If you're trying to get into Soundgarden, that's a great place to start. He also did a bunch of movie soundtracks. He did the Pink Panther, he did Superman Returns, but he's done mastering for some standalone records that are really good too, including Minutes to Midnight by Linkin Park, Float by Flogging Molly, and Hardwired to Self-Destruct by Metallica. It was mixed by a couple guys. And this is when the rabbit hole really sets in. The first guy that's listed as a mixer was Nick Didia, something like that. He worked on a bunch of stuff. Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, Train. He worked on every Rage Against the Machine album except for that cover record they did at the end. And then there was a guy named Tim Harkins. Now this is where Monster got excited. So I was not familiar with who Tim Harkins was, but I started looking at his credentials, and he worked with Korn, Jerry Cantrell, a handful of others. So following some Wikipedia links, I ended up on a page for a band called Mass Mental. Sorry, I got some congestion, and you're lucky I don't cough up a lung. I'm doing the best I can here. But I had to tell everyone about this Mass Mental band, okay? So the way I found this was Tim Harkins had worked with Jonathan Davis, and they were going to record a second album by this band, Mass Mental. Now, who's Mass Mental, and why should anybody care? Because if you're like me, you've never heard of them, which is really strange when I tell you who's in the band. So, Mass Mental featured Benji Webb on vocals. Now, if you're a nu metal fan, that name sounds familiar. He was the lead singer, is the lead singer in the band Skindred. Skindred rules. If you've never heard them, check them out. They're like reggae-infused nu metal. It's really fun. But he was in a band before Skindred called Dub War, I think it was. And that's how this all came to be. Because on bass was Robert Trujillo from Suicidal Tendencies at the time. Now, obviously, he's in Metallica, but at the time, Suicidal Tendencies was very funk and like a mix of metal and funk as well. And so then they got this guy named Armanda Sabal Leco. And I know that's probably mispronounced, but he's also on bass. The best that I can tell is there is not a guitar player on the recording. But this guy is pretty wild too, because he played bass with Paul Simon, Stanley Clarke, Herbie Hancock, like a bunch of classic musical artists. And then who's on drums? Oh, nobody in particular, just a guy by the name of Brooks Wackerman, where if you don't know who Brooks Wackerman is, Google him. But he was the drummer for Bad Religion. He was the drummer for Avenged Sevenfold. Another incredible musician. So these guys got together. This is back in the early 90s, and they did an album called How to Write Love Songs. And it's not anywhere available on streaming that I could find, but I did find it on YouTube. for the sheer wackiness of it, you ought to check it out. There's also some other guest musicians that pop up. Some of the guys from Soulfly, I think, end up on this album. Supposedly Lynn Strait, the original lead singer of Snot, who passed away. Snot only did like one studio album before Lynn Strait passed away, and that's a killer album. We will do Snot's album on the show for sure. But yeah, so if any of those names sound familiar to you, Robert Trujillo, Brooks Wackerman, I would recommend checking out Mass Mental. It's wacky. It is wide open, but it's super cool. A matter of fact, they did do a couple of reunion shows in like 2013, 2014, but that second album that Tim Harkins and Jonathan Davis from Korn were going to work on, it just never came to fruition. So when I was going back and thinking, hey, I ought to see who mixed and mastered that Caroline Spine album, I never thought I would discover a band featuring members of Skindred and Suicidal Tendencies and Brooks Wackerman. So that was fun in and of itself, at least for me. Hopefully somebody listening to this will get a kick out of that too. But that's really it. I thought that was pretty cool. When we did that Caroline Spine episode, again, we were so green, we didn't know what to include, what not to include. As a matter of fact, if you go back and listen to the first couple episodes, we don't even play clips of every song. We just play a handful of them. So obviously we're a lot more thorough now, but these first couple episodes are full of like blank spaces to fill in the blanks. So thought that was cool. A lot of great people worked on that album, which is why Attention Please sounds so big and massive, and I love it. So anyway, if you get a chance, go to YouTube, check out Mass Mental, give it a listen. It's wacky. It's fun. But yeah, that's it. So for Breakdowns for Breakfast, I have been Monster. This has been Second Breakfast, and I hope you have a great day.